Hello folks, welcome back to the Wikipedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. So today again we are continuing with the topic the standards on auditing, right? And the standard under consideration for today's lecture would be SA 500, the audit evidence, right? So whenever we talk about audit evidence, what is the first thing that clicks your mind? What do you basically understand when we talk about the term audit evidence? So in the layman's term, if we consider audit evidence, then it is those information that helps the auditor to draw a conclusion on the financial statement. That helps the auditor to draw a conclusion for the reporting purpose. Right? So those informations would be considered to be evidences. Right? So they are so reliable that you can draw your opinion on that. So all informations are not evidences, but all evidences are information. Right? So if we go to understand the objective of the auditor, right, then it is that he is supposed to design and perform certain procedures that will help him to evaluate or to get certain sufficient and appropriate audit evidences. And what does he do with that evidence? He forms an opinion, right? He forms a conclusion for the reporting purpose. So if we go by the text of what the institute has given in the study material, then it is the objective of the auditor is to design and perform audit procedures in such a way to enable the auditor to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidences to be able to draw reasonable conclusion on which to base the auditor's opinion. So there are basically 4 points of consideration. That is, design and perform the audit procedure, obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, draw reasonable conclusion. It is not an absolute conclusion again. So even the word reasonable is important. Although I have highlighted only the conclusion, but even reasonable is an important word. So let us highlight that. So we have highlighted reasonable, right? So to draw reasonable conclusion, why does he want to draw reasonable conclusion? Because his ultimate objective is to give an opinion on the financial statement, right? That is his prime objective, his pervasive objective of performing an audit. So ultimately the objective of SA 500 would lead to meet the overall objective of the audit, right? Then post that we have certain definitions given in the standard, right, that we need to understand before we commence forward, because these definitions, these terminologies are the base of this standard. So unless and until you understand these terminologies, it is very difficult for you to interpret what the standard wants to say, right? So what are the terminologies that we need to define? It is accounting records, audit evidences, sufficiency, appropriateness, and management's expert. So basically, before going to the definition part, right, let us come back to the objective. I'll give you an insight of what SA 500 has got to say. So to start with, SA 500 will first focus, right, on telling you what evidences are. What do you mean by evidence? Right, and they are basically two kinds. Like we have seen that it has to be sufficient and it has to be appropriate. So we'll understand what sufficiency and appropriateness mean, right? Then the evidence can be gathered either from the entity while the auditor is performing his work, plus the evidence can also be gathered from a management expert. Now you know that there are two kinds of expert that you involve. One is the management expert and the other is the auditor's expert. So when we talk about the auditor's expert, it is dealt by SA 620, right? That is when we use the work of an expert. So initially, before this framework came into enactment, auditor's expert, the SA 620 was the only standard that dealt with the expert. So you considered the auditor's expert and management expert both in SA 620. But after the new framework was applied, the portion of management expert was given separately in SA 500 when we are talking about audit evidences, right? So here we will be discussing only about the management. So in SA 500 audit evidences, we will deal in detail with how to deal with the work of a management expert, or how to overall deal with the management expert, right? So after we have dealt with the management expert, we will see what are the audit procedures, right, that the auditor will apply for obtaining the audit evidences that they need, right? And then what are the methods of obtaining those audit evidences? There are certain methods that you have already seen in IPCC when you have done it, right? So we will basically brief upon those methods today, right? And at the end, we will again draw a comparative study on what are the evidences that would be more conclusive, or obviously we don't have a very conclusive evidence in audit. So we would say what are the evidences that would be considered to be less persuasive, sorry. Right? So the evidences that would be less persuasive as compared to the other evidences. So we will draw a comparative study at the end. Right? So this essay focuses on these portions only. Right? Now we'll go ahead to see what the essay says in detail. So the next portion that we are covering is the definition. And we have already seen that we'll be covering the accounting records, audit evidences, sufficiency, appropriateness, and management expert. Right? So we will be dealing with each one of them separately in the coming 4 slides. So basically over here what we want to discuss is audit accounting records. Basically, if you understand that any information that we have or the input that we give for the financial statement is the accounting record. For example, if we have any entry, if we have any invoice to be entered, if we have any terms and conditions of the contract, if we have any accounting entry, the supporting records, the general and the specific ledgers, the journal entries that we make, the records in the financial statement that are not reflected in the journal entries, and other records like the spreadsheet that are supporting the cost allocation and etc. So all these kinds of information that are plotted into are cumulatively known as accounting records, right? Then we have audit evidences, sufficiency and appropriate audit evidences, and management expert. These will be dealt in the subsequent slides. So when we talk about audit evidence, what is the meaning of audit evidence? So basically, if you understand in the layman's term, right? So any information, whether it is accounting or it is non-accounting information, that is helping the auditor to draw a conclusion, to come to an opinion, to form an opinion on the financial statement, right? All those information would be termed to be audit evidences, right? So accounting and other information used to arrive at a conclusion are audit evidences. And hence the auditor should draw should design the audit procedures so as to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, right? Now when we talk about sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, right, we need to understand that these two terminologies, sufficiency and appropriateness, are inversely proportional, right? You understand what inversely proportional is? Inversely proportional means that if the sufficiency level increases, appropriateness level can be decreased. But actually it is the reverse. If the appropriateness level is low, then you will have to increase the sufficiency level. And if the appropriateness level is high, then you can keep the sufficiency level at lower range, right? Now to get a better understanding on that, we would see what is appropriate and sufficient. So when we talk about sufficiency, it talks about the quantity, quantum, and appropriateness basically deals with the quality, right? So when we say that we are performing some procedures that would help us to gain sufficient audit evidence, then we mean that we are deriving a large quantity of audit evidence, right? And quantum basically will always depend on two factors. One is the quality, that is appropriateness, and other is the risk of material misstatement. So consider it in this way: if the audit evidence that you are drawing is appropriate, right, then you can have lower amount of evidences. For example, now if we are considering for example, debtor balances, right? So we have 10 debtors in our industry, in our entity, and now if we compare the total balances of the debtor, that is outstanding, the debit, right, and we arrange it into descending order, and we pick up top 4 debtors, right, and we see that the total of the top 4 debtor accounts for 90% of the total debtors. So we would consider that, yeah, if these 4 debtors are correct, if we go into the testing and we see that, yeah, these debtors exist, and the calculation behind them, the reporting is accurate. So if existence and accuracy is met in the first 4 debtors, then we would consider it to be sufficient for drawing an opinion on the reliableness of the debtor, right? But now suppose we have 15 debtors and all are homogeneous. Now we don't have a debtor going up to 1 CR and some being below 10 lakhs. Suppose all 15 debtors are ranging somewhere around 15 to 20 lakhs. So how do you select 4 debtors? Now you will have to increase the quantum. If you want to cover 70-75%, then you will have to cover more than 10 debtors, right? Either floating confirmation or taking other evidences, performing other procedures. Whatever procedure you perform is a secondary thing, right? But what is the quantum that you will decide? The quantity of number or quantity or the number of debtors that you will consider to be sufficient for drawing the evidence, for making a conclusion. You cannot just check 10-15% of the debtor and say okay, the debtors are correct. No. Test checking, okay, that is one part of the audit, but at least when you are test checking, you will have to look at the coverage that you are making, right? So if the evidence is appropriate, then lower sufficiency would be justifiable. But if the appropriateness level is not to the extent that we require, right, or not up to the mark, then we will have to increase the sufficiency to counter the drawback of the lower appropriateness, right? Now next is the ROMM. If we have a higher risk of material misstatement, then we will have to increase the quantity of the samples that we take for the evidence. And if we have a very lower risk of material misstatement, that means if we consider the internal controls are very good, the processes are being performed, the procedures are being performed very efficiently in the company, and there is very less probability of any misstatement, so we may not have to get into such extensive checking. In those areas where the internal controls are very strong, we can be good to go with lower quantity of the checking, lower quantity of the samples, right? So sufficiency would basically depend on two portions. One is the appropriateness and other is the risk of material misstatement. Is that clear with you now? Okay, now we move on to the appropriateness, right? So appropriateness would basically depend again on two factors. One is how relevant that is, and second, how reliable it is to support a conclusion, right? So in the example that we had taken for the number of debtors, if the first 4 debtors account for the 90%, account for total of the 90% of the total debtors, right, then and they are debtors and we are checking debtors and they are genuine debtors, so we'll see that yeah, these quantity or these samples that we have taken up are appropriate for us to draw a conclusion on the entire dump of debtors, right? They are relevant. Why? Because they are high value items, they are high value debtors, and if we want to see the risk of bad debt, then, and if we have checked these debtors and we find that there is no risk of bad debt over here, then we are satisfied that okay, 95% debtors are secured, are risk free. It is never risk free, we always have residual risk, but at least they have lower risk of default, right? So we'll say that yeah, these 4 samples are relevant. And are they reliable? And yes, it is reliable, because again the coverage is of 90%, right? So sufficiency depends on appropriateness. Appropriateness does not necessarily depend on sufficiency. It depends on the relevant and the reliableness of the evidence, of the information, right? So now you understand what are audit evidences, what are sufficiency, what is sufficiency, and what is appropriateness, and also what is accounting records. So out of the 5 definitions, we have already covered 4 of them, right? Now we have to cover the last part, that is the management expert. So meaning of the audit evidence is over. Now we move on to the next slide, which says, or which talks about the management expert, the last among the definitions that we have to cover, right? So when we talk about the management expert, let us see the definition as provided by the institute in the relevant standard. So it says, he is an individual or organization possessing expertise in the field other than accounting or auditing, whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement, right? So basically what we understand is, when we talk about management expert, it is not compulsory that he needs to be an individual. We can also hire an entity, an organization, right, as a management expert. The other factor that we need to consider is that they are from any field other than accounting and auditing. because for that we are present, right? And whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement. Now, what are the kinds of experts that you encounter? Number one example is actuary, right? You don't know how to do the actuarial valuation for gratuity, for leave encashment, for employee benefits, right? Basic employee benefits. You don't know how to actually undergo those calculations. And even if you do that, do you think the auditor will consider it to be reliable? No. Because those are complicated areas and we need an expert's view, an expert's opinion on that area. We need the figures that have been given provided by an expert, right? Now if you want to involve somebody for your costing purpose, you involve a cost accountant for that, right? The management may not have that expertise in his entity, so what he does is he involves an external cost accountant for that. So cost accountant will be considered to be an expert, right? Now there are some litigations for the company. The company has undergone some litigations and the company is not able to handle it. Maybe there are some income tax litigations, some other litigations for the labor law or anything. Now how do you set up your reliability on that? You will be reliable if those matters are being dealt by experts like the lawyers, right? So now do you understand what do we mean when we talk about management expert? Right. So by this we cover all the 5 definitions that have been provided by the institute, right? Now management's expert, as we have seen, is now a part of SA 500 and auditor's expert is a part of SA 620. Now what is the difference between the management's expert and the auditor's expert? So basically, as we can see in the definition, management's expert is appointed by the management of the company to support them into those fields of expertise that they need, right, in order to help them to prepare the financial statement, whereas auditor's expert is the expert that is involved by the auditor. And why does the auditor involve an expert? When auditor is not able to form an opinion on certain things, there are certain areas where the auditor has no knowledge about. How do you judge it? For that you will employ an expert who has that knowledge. You rely on that expert, right? That means his competency, his capabilities are something that you can depend on, right? And then you use his work to draw a conclusion on certain specific matters, right? So that is an auditor's expert, and in detail the auditor's expert will be covered in SA 620. Now we are concerned with the management expert, right? Now the management has involved an expert, right? Now is it that yes, the management says, okay, this paper, this document, this has been prepared by the expert, so please rely on that? Will you rely on that blindfolded? That okay, this work has been done by the expert, and expert means by the word he is a person with great knowledge, right? He must have done everything right, so let me depend on that. No, you will not. Anything coming from the management, you cannot blindfoldedly depend on that. You will apply your professional skepticism, right? So whenever you come across an area where the management has involved an expert, you will have to judge as to the reliability of that report. So when you want to judge the management's expert, what are the basic things that you would consider? First, you would evaluate the competence, capability and the objectivity of that expert, right? These are the 3 terminologies that you will have to learn and write in your examination as well. That yes, you will evaluate the competency, capability and objectivity. Now what is competency? Competency basically refers to the nature of expertise that he has and the level of expertise that he has, right? So when we're talking about actuarial valuation, does he have that expertise when we talk about the nature into the nature of calculation of those gratuity? Has he qualified the actuarial examination, the actuarial examination? Is he a part of the Institute of Actuary? If he is, then we'll say okay, he is a competent person. But that competency is not enough. We will also have to judge his capabilities. Now when we talk about capabilities, we basically mean the ability of that expert to use his competence, right? If that expert is able to exercise his competence, that means he is capable of working for you also. Just because he has qualified some examination does not mean that he is an expert and he will be doing the fair work for you. If he's not capable of utilizing that knowledge of his in the work that you have asked him to do, that means he's not capable and we cannot rely on him, right? And the third part is the objectivity, right? So this relates to the possible effect of the biasness, the conflict of interest, or the influence of others that may have on the professional or the business objectivity of the management expert. So if the management expert is biased, for example, if the management expert is a relative of the MD of the company, and the MD says, okay, for this now, please give me some valuation close to this figure so that it is beneficial for my financial statement. And when the actuary is getting into such intense calculation, and even if you manipulate some data over there, you will not be able to catch that. Trust me, that is a very complicated thing, right? So you will also have to judge his objectivity. Is he biased? Is there any conflict of interest with the entity? Right? Is his decision, his work being influenced by somebody? Right? So auditor has his own procedures to judge these things. So once you have evaluated the competency, capability and objectivity, now when we talk about he has his own ways. So what are his own ways? We know that you have to judge his competency, you have to judge his capability, you have to judge his objectivity. How do you do that? As an auditor, how will you do that? So first you will see, like for example, if you are at a client and in that area because actuaries are really very low in the country, so we are taking up the example of actuary. You know that in that area you have one famous actuary, ML Sondhi, for example, right? I'm taking a hypothetical example, and you have been on other clients also where you have seen the reports given by ML Sondhi, and over here you see, okay, ML Sondhi has given us the report. That means I have a previous experience with ML Sondhi and I know his competency. So that will say that, okay, ML Sondhi is a very good actuary, right? His competency level is high, his capabilities are very good, and his objectivity, I am very clear with it. There is no problem with that, I can rely on his report. Otherwise, if you don't know, there is some other, Mr. ML Agarwal, right? Then how do you go ahead with it? You will have to discuss with him. Okay, hello mister. So I would like to gain some information about you. Right? Then he will tell you that, okay, I am supporting these clients, I prepare the documents for these very big clients, these listed clients, and the auditors over there, they depend on my work. I have qualified from this area, I've been practicing for the past 10 years, and this, right? Then you'll say, okay, I think it's going good, and then you'll also justify it, and you will like confirm it, right? If you know from the industry that what about this person, right? If you know some other person who knows about this person, then you will discuss with that person, hey, what is the capability of Mr. ML Agarwal? Is he doing good? Can I rely on his report? Right? You will judge his knowledge, you will judge his qualification. Which institute did you go to? What did you qualify? Where is the degree? How long have you been practicing? Right? And if there is anything published, if he is so famous that he has published certain books, certain documents, and people rely on that books for some support, then you'll understand that he is a capable person. Right? Or otherwise, the auditor can also involve his expert to judge the competency, capability and objectivity of the expert of the manager. If he is not able to do so, he will have to hire somebody who is expert in doing that, who is expert in evaluating people. Right? So once that is done, then is this the only thing sufficient? No, there are certain other procedures that the auditor has to do. Right? But we will take up that procedure in the subsequent lecture, because we lack time in the lecture today, right? So we'll cover up the other topics in the lecture after this. So please stay tuned for that. This is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye.